Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Please let me know if you can't. Welcome back to the Legion Academy. Another show here this evening. I am once again not joined by Joe DePinto. We're still waiting on Joe. Joe's, working through his injury and will be making a recovery and returning to Legion Academy. We hope sooner rather than later. But nonetheless, don't despair. You won't actually have to listen to me for the entire evening. I do have a special guest. Jace is back in studio. He's going to jump in here. He's actually just waiting on the other side, and I'll bring him on camera here in a second. So just kind of give you a rundown of tonight's show. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk a little bit about R2. Not specifically about, we're not doing a unit breakdown or analysis or anything like that, but we feel that people have had some chances to at least run them in TTS. Some people have got them on the table, worked through the kinks and the nuances of R2, found out what they don't like. I got lots to share about what I don't like about R2, and just talking about playing him in TTS and what that brings. He is strong. There is some weaknesses for sure. We're going to talk a little bit about the pros and cons and break that down. Talk a little bit about the command cards and see where they fall out in the pros and cons list as well. Then we're going to transition a little bit into vital assets conversation, framed around a little bit about R2, but clones as well. And then we're going to dog on clones a little bit, specifically because Jace is playing them right now. And although I really like them, I am trying to steer clear and really work on lists that can handle clones. And then I'm going to show a little bit about what I've been doing hobby-wise. Jace can talk about what he's been doing. He doesn't have anything to show this evening, but he can talk about it for sure. We'll talk about Invader League. As I said, he's still playing in the league, so going deep. And I've been playing a bunch of TTS, mostly because Joe guilt-shamed me into playing. And now I can't even play with him. So when he gets back, I'll be all practiced up, but I'll still pretend like I don't know the buttons. I really don't, but I'll pretend like I don't, and it will be easy to pretend. And then we'll kind of talk about some of that. And we have lots of other exciting stuff coming out, and I'll talk a little bit about what I'm super excited about. But before we get too far, I'm looking in chat here. I see Keith is building some Lord of the Rings and Elder Scrolls right now. Keith, I heard you say on your podcast you were getting some Elder Scrolls, so that's cool. You got that. Likely going to drop a painting tutorial or something on that in the near future. I'm going to talk about a tutorial I'm going to be dropping here as soon as I finish up school. School is jammed me right up right now with grad season, but I will kind of give you a preview of something I'm working on right now. So let's slide over here. Say hello to Jace. Hello, Jace.
Hey.
Fantastic. Jace is coming to you from his bedroom, so when it's nighttime, he's not far away. I definitely don't want to see Jace's mom appear on the screen. Jace's mom is very nice, by the way, very nice. I just give him a hard time all the time, and that's not going to change in the immediate future or distant future or likely ever. And he's
you give me a hard time, Sean, but this isn't actually my house.
I'm aware it's not your house. I didn't want to say that you were at your best friend's house, but I just was giving you a tough time there. So nice bunk beds, by the way.
Thank you.
Awesome. So we are all chatting. I see Ethan Judd's in chat. And folks, if you're in chat, make sure that you let us know that you're there, what you're doing. We'll get you up on screen. We'll say hello to you, all of those fun things. So Jace, let's start with you. What's happening in your immediate Legion-related future or past?
Future. Thursday, I play my round of 32 versus Luke Cook. Kingsley's going to be streaming that. So
fantastic. Put your bets down.
Yep. Yeah. Put your bets down on the mirror match. Who can roll more crits?
Yep.
As for the past, I just spent my whole weekend basing 15 units of Imperials. So lots of hobby getting done.
Yeah. And what scheme did you go through go for with your Imperials?
I've just done the same scheme with all of my armies, just so they match. Just a nice, normal grass and dirt base. Not much to it. Sand,
cool.
Some paint, some gamer's grass.
Okay, fantastic. I want to talk more about your Invader. I'll just give, just since you kind of gave the hobby-related stuff, I'll jump in here and say what I've been up to, and then we'll go back and talk a little bit about that. Maybe you can kind of give us a league overview, maybe who got knocked out in the first round of 64 that kind of what's advancing, that sort of stuff. So what I've been working on is primarily working on my AAT, one of my AATs that is. And let me just start with a base. So this is the base that I'm working on right now, and I'm going to do a tutorial on this on Patreon this month, but you'll see it before long. It'll pop up. So if you're not a patron, don't panic. But this is what's going on. Let me just see if I can get that to focus on my. There we go. Go back face level. So this is a couple stages through. It's a little blue right now, but it is going to be a snow base in the end. So I'm kind of working on those real blue tones, those wet looks, and kind of just bringing that up. So I did a combination of using Gamers Grass has actually come out with a line of basing materials. They've done like some rocks and some ruins and things like that. So I am using some of those on here as opposed to a talus or a plaster. And then I did this base up with a single piece of cork, and then I just actually carved into it. So you can see I kept the notches in here. I sort of sunk down the flight stand a little bit because I wanted my AAT to be a little closer to the ground. I also have a little narrative going on with the droids in the background. I don't have the droids to show you, but I will show you the AAT for now. So I went with and I described this before I was going to do this. Somebody beat me to the punch on the camo, so I have to give them credit for sure. But I had said, and Jace can justify, I was always going for the World War II theme for my droids. But here's my tank thus far, and so I went for a really weathered look. So I've been spending a lot of time on the weathering. It's very subtle. It's hard to see here on this camera, but I went with the grays because I love grays. 50 Shades of Grey is one of my favorite movies. Just kidding, but it is one of my favorite paint lines. And so I have this real cool camo scheme to go with my gray themed droids. If you guys haven't seen my droids before, they're here. They're gray, and so this is going to be on a snow base as well. I do have a very special droid that I have been working on as well. This we haven't really named him yet, but I'm going to call him Larry for the purposes of this video. And so if I put my hand there, see if that'll focus. So he's my hatch droid. So what I have him doing is tumbling into the hatch. And if I go ahead and put him in there, you can see he's just hanging on to the edge of the hatch. Let me just see if I can focus that up for you guys. There we go. And so he's tumbling into the hatch and he's hanging onto the outside. And so he's removable, so I can pop another insert in there. But quite a fun guy to do, and it kind of fits with my comedic droids that I've been working on. You guys can probably see some of the weathering on the tank as well. So this has been my week project. So both a fun project as well as a tutorial related project. So that's what I've been working on in addition to getting some TTS games in. And I've also been working on the Kashyyyk tree. I finally finished after about 3 weeks of applying Cellu clay. I have all the bark done, and it's ready now to be painted. And so last night about, I don't know, what was that, about 11:30, Jace, I sent you the message that said, hey, this needs 2 coats. So we'll get Jace back in studio here now that we can somewhat have some interaction in person. And he'll get working on that, and he'll tell you all about how fun it is to paint brown paint. When we get that done. So that's going on. I see over here Robert, he says he's working on creating several new tables for a local events. That's cool. Geonosis, Mustafar, and Hoth. That's awesome. And maybe you can post some of that up on the Legion Academy page. We'd love to see that stuff. So talk to us a little bit, Jace, about Invader. So maybe work backwards. Talk about your upcoming game, and then maybe talk about your previous round and kind of what you're seeing left in Invader.
Cool. So my upcoming game, as I said before, is me and Luke Cook. We're playing Thursday. We are both playing Republic, and we're both playing the exact same Rec Star list, just all the Phase 2s, Arc Snipers, Rex. So it's going to be interesting. Going to see which mirror match can make it out. Of notable games that have happened, well, I guess I'll go through my past game first. My first game, so my round of 64 game, I was playing against Technophobia, who was playing some droids. It was a really good game. It was a really close game. He was playing Dooku with 5 B1s and a B2, and then 3 sniper strike teams. We were playing Intercept, and his snipers were really pounding my guys. He was doing a really good job of poking his snipers around so that they could only see a mini or two, killing them, so that then he was able to, if he had to move and use AI, he could move, or if he could see another unit, he did a very good job of making sure they always had an order so he could take an aim and get that pierce through. I was losing clones a lot faster than I would have liked, but by turn 5, I had taken the middle point on turns 2 and 4, so I was up 4-2 on objectives. And he had ran Dooku behind a building to where I was able to just swing out enough clones on turns 4 and 5 to just see the edge of his silhouette in heavy cover and just hit him with 4 Z6 shots and 2 sniper shots and take out Dooku. And that was basically the game changer. He didn't have enough units left that he could push on there. He was really relying on Dooku to get up there and just, take out a couple activations, because I had 2 strike teams, a clone unit down to 2 minis left on there, and then R2 was pushing for secret mission, so he had to leave some droids back to deal with that. So I squeaked out a win there.
Well, couple things. So we'll talk about R2's secret mission, because that'll formulate a bulk of what we're going to talk about this evening. But I did want to talk a little bit about, if I could, silhouettes. And so
Yep.
I'll let you go first, and I'll talk about kind of because obviously my only interaction with silhouettes has been on TTS currently. But what are you finding them like on TTS? Do you find that you're going to them a lot? Do you find that they're kind of like an inconvenience? Are you finding they have value on TTS? And do you think that value is going to translate to tabletop directly?
So the more I've played with silhouettes on TTS, the more I have actually grown to like them. I find them useful on TTS, but in real life, I do not think I will find them nearly as useful, mostly just due to it's a lot harder than, you can't just click a button and have a cylinder pop up. I've been using the silhouettes a lot in TTS, mostly just because you're able to get that obscure shot around, or, just which minis you can see. But I feel that once we get into it in real life, it's going to be a real steep learning curve for all of us, just to figure out how to use an actual, silhouette, place it behind the mini.
Yeah. So here's I have a very very parallel view as to silhouettes for you, and I have a dog making a greeting back there. So I think that silhouettes will be fantastic. I feel like that silhouettes on the tabletop will be exactly as you described. They will be far more finicky. My fear is that you will put a silhouette behind a mini, and then you'll be able to identify, yes, I can see that. Then you'll go to, can I see this one as well? Can you move the silhouette there? And so you'll be moving the silhouette around, and not saying 6 or 7 models or 4 or 5 models, but you will probably have to move it multiple times. And one of the things that I worry about is the tightly packed and positioning of units, and how much finicking and finessing and bumping is actually going to occur inadvertently as you try to discover whether you can or can't see things. And as a player, if I have an opinion that you can't see something, and I put a silhouette down, and then I know I not purposely, but I bump it accidentally, and then suddenly it's much more visible than I felt it was before, I think a little certain level of frustration might set in with me. Likewise, if my opponent were to do the same thing, and I'm not saying anyone's going to do this intentionally, but if they were to put the silhouette down and bump it in the opposite way, let's say in their favor, and now a shot that I believed I had before you put the silhouette down, I clearly don't now that you've bumped it inadvertently or not. So I love on TTS, boom, throw the silhouettes up, great, I can see all 7, yep, easy, I can see these 4, take the silhouettes down. There's no room for error. There's no change in game state based on something that a human has done. However, I think with silhouettes on the table, that potentially will be an issue. Where on the tabletop I feel it will be fine and it won't necessarily be an issue, I'm just going to turn my volume down just a little bit here. Where I feel that it might be a slight issue for players is that, sorry, I shouldn't say slight issue, I should say a slight improvement, is specifically around the models that we know were troublesome before. The Grievuses, the Wookiees, the Luke Skywalkers, the things where it sort of condense your model down. I did want to ask you this about silhouettes too, and folks that are in chat, feel free to give us your rendition or opinion around silhouettes. But I wanted to ask you, do you feel that silhouettes may potentially be I know before we were saying that they seem to be slimming models down, and they're taking all those extraneous parts out. But I actually feel that, and I use this term in a non-derogatory way, I feel that models have all got fatter. The B1s, the B1s are now all fat. They're these big square blobs, where before I really felt that that slim profile was to my advantage. The R2-D2s of the world have, most short people want to be taller, but I'm not sure that in this case that's to his advantage. Certainly to the Wookiees there's a slight advantage, but I would say that there's more to the disadvantage of silhouettes than there was before. So everyone is suddenly got a little bit more robust, and has inadvertently becoming easier to shoot. I'm not sure if you're finding that or not as well.
No, I definitely have, especially the corners by the heads of the models, right? Those are always seem to be the parts you can always shoot. It's like everybody's head just got massive.
Yep. And that's one of the things that you really have to take into account, because before you'd position your models a little bit more from the model perspective. It's like, okay, yeah, his shoulder's tucked in here, and he's inside the periphery of that building. Now I slam a silhouette down, and I just see that silhouette sliver, and suddenly it's like, well, I guess he's not as clear as I thought he was, or not as in the clear as I thought he was. So. Yeah, so overall, I think my impression of TTS for silhouettes is fantastic. I think that it does not slow it down. In fact, for me, as a player who's not zipping my camera around, I primarily play from I'm struggling to get out of that traditional player perspective where I'm playing over the table. I find that the silhouettes are nice if I do need to zoom down, and I can really identify that line. However, on the tabletop, I'm dreading a little bit the use of the silhouettes. So. But that's without a proper contextual opinion. I'm just saying that based on the ease at which TTS populates those. So that's kind of my perspective on that. So let me ask you a little bit more about TTS. So like round one, I think going in, if I remember the stats correctly, there was a fairly even number of clones, and I want to say maybe, was it clones and rebels that were kind of...
Clones and rebels, I believe there was 20 of both.
Yeah, and then followed a little bit down for droids, and was it Empire coming in last at 11 or something like that?
Yeah, droids were 14, and Empire was around 10 then, I think.
10, okay, fair enough. Yeah, that makes 64. So after the first round, I'm not sure if all the 64 round matchups have concluded, but what kind of trends have you seen? What has been emerging? Has it been still the same sort of mix, or has one faction significantly dropped off?
Well, we did go down to 12 clones. So we did lose 8.
But by ratio, you have 20 in there, so that's not
yes.
That's not unexpected. But did rebels also drop?
And half of those clones were actually to mirror matches as well.
Okay, well then that explains that anomaly for sure. It's not an anomaly any longer, but
rebels dropped down to 7 for the top 32.
Okay, that's a fairly significant drop for sure. I mean, some of them may have been mirror matches as well.
Yep. I think most of them were mirror matches.
Okay, fair enough. Well, this might bode well for the Empire
Most
here
were mirror matches.
Maybe squeak through.
Yep. Droids went down to 8.
Okay, from, what'd you say, 16?
From 10.
From 10, sorry.
And Empire went down to 5 from 10. Droids were at 14.
Oh, 14. Okay, yeah. Okay, so
and Empire went from 5 to 10, or 10 to 5.
Okay, so I guess in a way the ratio almost stayed nearly the same. And obviously you have a mirror match yourself. I'm not sure what the next round matchup looks like, but hopefully they're not all mirror matches. So it'd be nice to maybe get a good smattering of units making it, or armies making it through, certainly to the top 8, and kind of see what shakes out there. But I wouldn't be surprised to see a clone in the final. For sure. Maybe it's yours. Let's. I don't want to cheer specifically against any one person, but I did identify that I'm Jace's #1 fan in a previous video, so I don't want to rescind that here live. Don't tell him. But also I know Luke, and Luke is a good guy and an excellent player, obviously. Luke is also exceptionally lucky From at least, I'm not saying he's lucky and that's how he's done well, but he also seems lucky and good. And then sometimes you have to be good to be lucky, and vice versa. So it'll be an exciting game. That's on Thursday, is that correct?
Yep, Thursday.
And Kingsley is casting that?
Kingsley's casting.
Okay,
yep.
Fantastic. So
I do have one more good stat for you from
Sure,
Invader
yep.
League right now.
Yep.
Of those 5 Imperials that made it, there is
How many
one more
E-Webs?
playing. There's one more playing tonight. 0 E-Webs. There is one more playing tonight, and if he loses, there will be 0 Imperials left in single limbs.
Oh. Okay. Fantastic.
The other 4 all lost.
Okay. Well, that's not boding well for the Empire, but I think we already kind of knew that. So, give me this stat. How much armor? And we're not gonna talk specifically about armor tonight, but although we will cycle back around to that in a near future episode for sure. How much armor have you personally encountered, and then how much do you think is still out there in the wilds of the TTS bracket?
So I played 1 AAT in my round robin, and that was it that I played against armor. I know there is 1 AAT left in single limbs right now. And I am not sure if there's any other armor. I think that might be the only armored vehicle left.
Okay, gotcha. Alberto Paz coming in here. Al Paz. I'm not. Geez, I forget what I've downgraded to him to. So let's just say he's a guy that's been able to click on the link for the show. If you win, Jace, he is going to give you lunch. And if you lose, you owe him lunch at the next major event. So I heard Al's a cheap date. So you probably are okay either way, meaning you'll probably get a cheap lunch as well. But fair enough. So we like Al occasionally. So let's move over and talk specifically about what we came here to chat about tonight, and that is R2-D2. Okay, so I got the R2-D2 card up. I'm just going to give a quick run through it. I'm sure many of you have seen it, but let's just talk specifically about it. So when we reference the keywords and things like that, we all have an idea what we're talking about. So R2 here, this is the Rebel card. Obviously, he is cross-faction and can play with the clones as well, the Republic. He has 35 points. It doesn't matter which faction. Has a comm slot. The action ability of Repair 2, Capacity 2, fantastic. The free action of Secret Mission once per game. If you're within the deployment zone, you will get you can place a victory token on R2 at the end of the game. If you have the victory token, meaning you are still alive, you gain that victory token. Really important, specifically for games that have very few victory points to be had. He has the grounded keyword, so he cannot climb or clamber, although that doesn't prevent him from getting in the air, and we'll talk about that. He also has inconspicuous. When an enemy unit performs an attack, if you have at least one suppression token, it must attack another unit if able. We'll talk a little bit about that if able part of that is important. And during your rally step, you may choose not to remove suppression tokens. Very important distinction there, that you will remove them at the end of the turn, but you do not need to remove them for the rally step. So that's an important distinction. I think initially when I played him for the very first time, I was thinking I could keep it on in all cases, but you can in fact not. That was quite a while ago, since obviously cleared that up, but it is an important thing. If you just read it quickly, you may think that there is the ability to keep that. He has an electroshock attack, which is melee and range 1 with 3 white. It is suppressive. He has white dice saves. He is an operative in the designation. 4 health, 4 health and 2 courage. He surges both up and down to hit and block. Al is laughing, and Ethan says, next major when? So sad Gen Con was canceled after Worlds. Absolutely. Jace and I were both destined for Gen Con. It's looking like perhaps LVO may be the next major. I'm not sure. And then Warfare is what Al was saying was potentially the next hope. Al, what was it? We looked that up, Jace. When was that? Was that a November tournament?
November,
Warfare?
sometime November.
Yeah, I was talking about that I may potentially try to do a Warfare weekend. I'll have to see how it falls in the school calendar. but I may be able to go there. I will collect Jace's lunch. I will certainly not pay for Jace's lunch. Before Al gets any clever ideas there. Okay, so let's go back to R2 here. So first glance here, Jace, what stands out to R2 in terms of like, not what you love, but what have you seen? And you're running R2 in your list as well, so you can talk from that capacity. Yep. What role do you have him in? What keywords have been instrumental? What are the best qualities of R2? Save some of that for the pros and cons, of course, but give us your impression of R2.
So R2 is in my list mostly because of Secret Mission. And if he is not doing Secret Mission, he is sitting in my backfield just as another activation to get me to 11 and just back capping. That's okay. The only thing I use him for is just objectives.
Let me ask you this. Do you take, I don't want you to spoil anything, so if you can't share, I'm not sure if your command cards are out, but do you take VAPs in your command deck?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, and so in a mission, let's just say I'm playing you and you don't get choice, but I choose VAPS and I play Long March. It's a bit of a tough slog for R2 to get there. Is he a unit that you could see just doing back caps and tapping that VAP?
Depends on what you're playing. If you're playing, an army with a lot of models and there's not much room for R2 to get there, then yeah, I prefer to get my clones up, farther, have more guns. But if you're playing a unit or a army that's really short on model count, then I could see, running R2 up just because there's more gaps in the lines for him to fit through.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about kind of the pluses and minus missions or deployments specifically for R2, just in case you're either considering running him, or you may have counterpoints to anything that we're saying, and feel free to put them in chat. We'll certainly talk about that. Or if you have a different impression, or if you hate R2 as much as me, just go ahead and type that in there too. I don't actually hate R2. Let me a distinction. I dislike playing my current list versus R2. I've currently played the AAAT 19 times. I'm 15-4 with 4 losses to R2, all from Secret Mission. Thank you very much. So it is very hard for that list to stop, just because I simply do not have the ability to break the synergy of my list to deal with an annoyance that I refer to as R2. So I don't disagree with you at all. I think Secret Mission is obviously a steal for 35 points. Let's not forget that he's the best heal bot in the game. Let's not forget that he's got a counterpart that's comes at a discounted price as well. We're not going to talk too much about C3PO, but certainly at 15 points for a 50-point unit that can be both a buff as well as an annoyance, I think is fantastic. I would say this, that white dice surge defense 4 health is actually significantly more health than that when it translates to the table. I have killed R2 a few times, but I'm dedicating much more expensive units to do so, and probably more so than I would like to. Certainly I'm switching up a role of something to dedicate to R2. So I feel if you don't one-shot R2, the ability to get another shot at him before he's either fully healed or nearly fully healed is pretty slim. If you babysit R2 accordingly with a unit that has decent dice, let's say clones with the red dice saves, access to a bunch of dodges and surges, very difficult to get another shot at R2. Let me ask you from the experience side, Jace, how have you found your opponents have been either dealing with or not dealing with your R2?
So out of all of my Invader games, because that's basically all the games I've played recently, haven't really done anything much outside of that. I have not lost R2 in a game yet.
Okay.
He's been shot at a couple times, but the 2 times he's been shot at, I was able to repair him, and then next time just play blast off and run away.
Yeah, and so let me ask you, in the course of those games, so a couple times he's been shot at. For the most part, though, are people just choosing to accept R2 is doing R2 things and they're dedicating their fire to other things, or are they seeking to shoot R2 but just simply can't?
There's been a bit of both. There's definitely been some times where R2's just been too far away from their army to do anything because we're playing a mission where, like key positions, where you got to get to the middle or you got to get to one of the objectives, and R2 just goes around the other side. But there's also just been times where they've shot at him once, put a suppression on, and then I just poke a clone unit in heavy cover around, and they have to keep shooting that.
Right. I will tell you this. I have, like I said, I have run into R2 as an annoyance, and I've played him in far more than the four games. Like I said, I've beaten some R2s for sure. I'm not gonna, take any shame from this, but there's been more than 3 times where I've dedicated Grievous to go chop that garbage can up, because I feel Grievous is he's able to do it generally in a single attack.
Yep.
But I'm dive bombing my Grievous to chop up a tin can and then leaving him exposed. And that's how fearful I am in certain missions of that secret mission. And so to dedicate 200 points to go deal with 35, likely prematurely, is a very terrible use of resources. However, in the grand scheme of things, if you're still playing it as an objective game, which I am, if that 200 point trade to a 35 point unit ends up being the game winner, or allowing me to do what I need to do, and in my list I can generally I can afford to lose Grievous. However, it's not my preferred use of him. That right there tells me that 35 points is of great value. I don't feel that my opponents are doing the same thing. Like, they're not sending
Yep.
in a 200 point commander to chop up a 36 point naked B1 squad. They don't translate to the same value, although they are very similar in points. They just simply do not trade in value. So that's kind of when we get into this pros and cons discussion. I specifically want to focus and narrow focus in on points cost. So I guess let's slide over there, since we're kind of already alluding to that. So here we are. We're just going to go through pros and cons. Jason and I had a little pre stream chat about this, and we came up with some very simplified key points. And we're going to talk about them as we're going through them. Like I said, throw in your comments, agree or disagree. We can even move things around if you think they need to be moved to the pro category. I will tell you that we came up with many more pros. Well, not many more, but we came up with the pros significantly easier than we came up with the cons. Let me just put it that way. All right, first one, Jace. I'll let you trade off with me here, and then I can chime in. You can do the same with me. So first one's up. Go ahead.
35 points, man. It's so cheap. Cheapest activation in the game for basically, if you can get him there, a free victory point. That is, as you said, the best repair bot and can't be shot after the first time. You just get so much value from it. And as you were saying about that health, the 4 health with the white die with repair, just crazy. It's so good because he's able to repair 4 more health. What's he at? Like effectively 11, 12 wounds, I think. Somewhere around there. It's
brutal. I mean, the surge is just another insulting thing, and yeah, if he's got C3PO with him, he's a bit more buffed. If there's a couple other units on the table, he's a bit more buffed. It's just that 4 is a deceitful 4. Do not think for a second that again, if I can equate it to cheap wounds, that those 4 wounds are the equivalent of anybody else with white dice and surge. It's just the focus in on him is immense. You can lose an R2 early. You can get that lucky shot. I've one-shotted an R2. There's no greater feeling than that right now for me, to be perfectly honest, other than killing E-webs. But yeah, I don't disagree at all. 35 points is costed. Talk a little bit about, Jace, about the inherent value here in a 35 point model that carries with them an effective victory point as well as 3 command cards. You don't have to talk about them specifically, but what do you think about that in terms of the translation of a 35 point unit with at least some mystique in terms of what he can do on certain turns?
Yeah, I mean, for 35 points, he's so versatile. Like, there's so many different things you can do with him. You can bring armor and repair it instead of repairing him. but the secret mission with the free victory point, right? For 35, like you're paying 35 points for a free victory point. And that's what I use them for in my army, right? Is if I can just late game turns 5 and 6, just dunk him into the end zone and get that victory point, especially victory point um, low victory point missions like key positions, right? You got 3 victory points. You don't even have to care to go for a second, key position. You can just run your whole army with R2 into the end zone and just hopefully kill more points.
Well, we're going to get into the to the vital assets conversation, but just remind me, or chat, you remind me. Let's cycle back a little bit and have a conversation about R2 in payload. I have a few cards. I did not include the payload card, but I do want to talk specifically about payload and the idea of R2 effectively changing the direction of games. And in terms of that, what I mean is a focused attention on R2. Again, 35 point steal for that. So, okay, let's just slide this aside. Let's bring up the next one. Here, we've already alluded to it. I won't spend a bunch of time on it, but secret mission. That idea that you have a victory point, and it's a victory point that can be scored. As Jace indicated here, turns 5 and turn 6 is certainly a threat, but there's the early threat of R2 in certain missions as well. And the point about R2 is, let's just say, for example, let me akin this to a key position. Key position, you're going to be fighting over that center point. However, I'm not sure how many games you've played, Jace, but seldom does that pivotal battle occur in turn 3 when somebody takes up the key position and holds it for 3 turns. That's much more a turn 5, turn 6. And so the attention of that particular position, the key position, if you will, doesn't occur till late game, and there's a pretty good chance that both players are well aware of that and can kind of see that battle happening. However, with R2, the potential to score that point and to get that and to extract or to walk in mid-game or to not threaten it for it in the early turns and then maybe turn it on turn 3, the dictation of that point and where that point could strike is actually determined by one player, and one player is forced to be reactionary to that. And it's not like R2 is a unit that has a lot to do in the game. Like, R2 is not your fire base of death troopers where you're looking to put out those massive dice pools with those aimed shots. R2 is not that unit that you're dive bombing to make that real pivotal melee or to muck up a line or something like that. R2 is not that fire base armor platform. R2 is not that armor unit that you're looking to block a lane and be a nuisance for the rest of the game. R2 is a perpetual nuisance from turn 1 based on the fact that he is so unpredictable because he can threaten so many things. And I think that Secret Mission is one of those potential threats that he presents. However, the versatility of R2 is outstanding. And so Secret Mission, sure, that's what's going to win you a game. However, I would say that R2 doesn't have to score that to help determine the course of victory for sure. Haven't seen a lot of disagreement in chat. You either don't care or agree. But if, like I said, if you don't think either one of those things and we're just spewing nonsense here, let us know for sure. All right, Jace, you're up with survivability or being survivable in the game.
So we touched on this a little bit before with that deceiving 4 health. Being able to repair himself is massive. Like, being the only character that can actually repair themselves natively. There is a lot of huge benefits that come to that, but also with the inconspicuous. Just, being able to not be shot is huge. Like, especially on a 35-point unit, right? Like, the next cheapest unit that can't be shot at is K2, and he's 90 points, and he's also gated behind however much Cassian is, like 110 point character as well.
Yeah.
So you're paying almost 200 points for a unit that can't be shot at until you use it, when you get basically the same value once you take a suppression token with R2.
And again, just to draw that comparison between those units, Cassian and K2 are presenting a very visible threat. You know what K2 is doing. Is K2 hanging back? Is K2 pushing for a melee? Is Cassian converted into sniper mode, or has he got a short range? Like, that's all visible determinants. I can make a reaction based on the fact that those plays develop a little bit more organically in the game. R2 is, like I said, he's rolling up and it's like, okay, well, right now he's going to roll up and heal this armor unit. Now I'm going to have a threatening armor unit that I need to deal with. R2 is going to roll off this direction and seemingly do nothing for a turn other than present that looming victory point. So I might need to shift gears. While I'm shifting gears to shoot him, I realize I can't. There's another unit there that I need to deal with. All right, so now I'm dedicated to that. Meanwhile, R2's moved off. Just when I think I got R2 cornered, boom, out comes the 1 pip. Here's a blast off. He's double moving for a turn. Now he's in a position that I can't reach him. So now I'm double moving to counter that. R2 slides in. Now we're talking turn 5. Oh, yeah, meanwhile, there's another objective game that I should be playing over here. R2 sneaking in for it. That's the annoyance. It's like R2 is that mosquito at a barbecue. You smack it, it just keeps coming back. You know it's there. You don't want to deal with. You're trying to ignore it, but you can't. And he's just all over the place. So Robert's saying in chat here that I'm going to pop this up on screen here. R2 is a low cost, high value unit that is worth much more as a 100-point operative if used right. I totally agree. I mean, it's a steal. It's a steal for what he does. I wouldn't say that. First, let me just start off by saying we're not advocating here that R2 needs to be bumped to, and you're not either, but to 100 or to a 75-point unit. I think R2 may need to fall in the realm of around maybe 50 points, and then C-3PO keep him the same. So then you're pushing him as more of an elite core in terms of related cost. And I think that probably pushes out the freebie activation that I think you can afford with R2, and we'll kind of talk about that as well. I think it's pushed out when this unit falls in that 60-65 range. And I think that's a nice balance. I still think he's fantastic. I don't think you take away anything from R2, but I think that you just present one less threat on the other side of the table, maybe potentially one less buffer unit for R2. Those sort of things balance out for sure. Okay, I think we got a next one. I think we're back to me here. Support unit strength. Okay, and this is a nice segue to what I was just talking about. I think that R2 is a pretty versatile, and this could really just say versatility here as well. And Jace has already pointed out, so I won't restate the points, but is he a heal bot? Is he a back capper? Is he helping capture an objective? Is he pushing for the secret mission? Is R2 attached to C-3PO and they're calculating odds to buff other units? Are they, and I'm not saying that he's going to be a fantastic melee unit or anything like that, but there is a world where R2 could be that annoying tie-up unit that puts you in the melee when you needed to do something else. Potentially he's already got his point. Potentially he just slides into melee with no intention of doing anything with his 3 white dice. But that is his protective mechanism when he's outpaced his own rebel units or his own clone units. And now he no longer has that shield or that buffer. Inconspicuous is not active, but now he's dumped himself into melee and you just can't get to him. Now you're effectively, like I talk about that, dedicating a unit to deal with R2. Now you're dedicating a unit to bail out from R2 to potentially do some more things. And if you don't one-shot him, well, guess what? You ain't shooting him anymore if he's got any other targets in range. And when this guy gets a suppression on board and gets that, well, he doesn't get that light cover, right? Because he'll be a droid trooper. Won't benefit from that suppression light cover. But that being said, he's still got that 4. He's still got that surge to defense. He is still not a pushover, even if you can get a shot at him. So I love the versatility of R2. That's one thing I think that makes him fantastic. He, like I said, he's the best heal bot in the game. He's a nice unit in the fact that he brings some cards. Have you seen many people using Smokescreen?
I have not. I have not ever played with it, and I've never played anyone who's been using Smokescreen.
Do you think that you see Smokescreen potentially more in a Rebel R2?
I would think so. I think a Rebel R2 would take Smokescreen a lot more.
Yeah, and we'll maybe before we get onto the cons, Jace, let's just maybe talk a little bit about the distinction and the difference. And you and I had a little pre-chat about this, about, R2 for clones right now, I think is an auto-include. I mean, he's an auto-include
Yeah.
at 30, 35 points, frankly, if I was building Rebels or clones. But
Yeah.
what's the differentiation between Rebel R2 and Clone R2 in a seemingly identical model? Like what do you see as the
Yeah.
distinction there?
The biggest distinction is the operative slot, right? Rebels have like 5 operative options. So committing one of them to R2 means you're skipping out on all your other options like K2 or Sabine or operative Luke. You can only take one more of those. And a lot of those other operatives do actually mesh very well together. Clones, R2 is the only operative right now. And even when Padme comes out, there's just 2 of them, and you got 2 slots. So you can take both of them. So there's no real reason not to take them because you got the free slot.
I mean, I don't know. There is a pretty big, significant downside to being able to take 2 secret missions in the same list. I mean, it
Yeah.
does seem. I mean, it seems kind of like a detriment to you. Oh wait, no, it
It,
isn't.
no. Nope.
Let's we'll come back to that. I just want to pop up Robert's comment here. He says R2 is a full utility. He can be used as a free roamer and a wild card that makes your opponent think about him, and you can use that to get them to make mistakes. R2 is quite the head case unit. I don't disagree. R2 has been an absolute nightmare for me. And I have, in all 4 games, I've successfully predicted with my opponent that I say in turn 0, your R2 secret mission will be the difference in this. And they may not even know it. I just know and what I'm saying is a specific list that I'm running against R2 right now. And I don't think that I want to pick a list specifically to counter R2, although there's a pretty good chance that R2 finds his way into dual factions and both faction lists. However, as Jace has correctly pointed out, there's competition within Rebels. And here's another couple points along those lines. It's really hard. I mean, we've been selling this story that a 35-point unit to not take in a Rebel list seems like just a bad play. However, if you think about some of the things that clones are taking R2 for, they're not taking him for offensive output. They aren't taking him always for secret mission, because as we talk about with deployments, and clones aren't really pushing for bids right now, at least that's not what I'm seeing clones push for. The deployments can really muck up your secret mission game. However, clones need activations, and so he's a fantastic buffer to that. Rebels don't. Rebels don't need a 35-point unit to get them over that 11 threshold. They're perfectly fine to get to that 13 number without R2. They certainly can get there with R2, and maybe in the armor list, they're still able to reach that and take slightly more expensive units. But R2 in the, let's say, stock standard Rebel list, if there is such a thing, let's just say a non-armor Rebel list, I think that there's other units that potentially people are taking more for the synergies, the K2SOs of the world with the Cassians, the Jins and the Cassians. I've even seen people sprinkle in Sabines in there. A Sabine Jin kind of list going on there. And then maybe R2's secret mission doesn't necessarily have as much to play in there because, I don't know, maybe you're pushing for a certain type of objective. Keith saying in chat here, I don't take him with K2SO and Cassian. R2 doesn't always fit with that, and I don't want to take his command cards because I need them. That's a good point, Keith, and fantastic segue. So let's just slide over here, Jace. I'm going to get rid of this card. You and I will pop up here. We're going to we'll get rid of R2 here, and let's start getting into the cons here. So Keith made a fantastic one. I'm going to go a little out of order here for the cons, Jace, just to transition to that, and we'll bring up command cards. So what you made a point about, Keith, is the same reason that we put command cards under cons. Now, not specifically because R2's command cards are bad, although I'll let Jace kind of talk about the frequency at which he's picking the cards. But what I do agree with what you said is that R2 in a list, specifically in a Rebel list, there's way too much competition for the command card slots. Maybe there's an argument to be said that Blastoff is your one pip that you take. However, let's just say you have a Jin and a Sabine in your list, or a Cassian in your list, or maybe a Luke Skywalker in your list. Is R2 and Luke Skywalker's the only one pip that you're going to take if you happen to take some other commanders? Are you dropping Leia's card? Are you, let's just say you're running, the Cassian. I've seen Cassian, R2, K2SO, and Jin all in the same one. Is R2's 1 pip, or 2 pip, or 3 pip going to compete with any of the other 1, 2s, and 3 pips that you're going to take in there? And I think, like I said, the case can be made for the 1 pip, but I don't know, Jace, what do you think about R2's 2 and 3? What are you bumping in any rendition of Rebels that you're taking 2 and 3?
I've never seen 2 and 3 used, and I have personally never used them. His 2 pip, mostly because if you look at his 2 pip, his 2 is like a flamethrower weapon. But just as we said before, you're not taking R2 to be this offensive output, machine, right? You're not taking him to chuck dice at your opponent. If you're using dice with R2, either you're tying yourself in a melee or something has gone very wrong for R2. It also only gives an order to him, and if I'm playing a 2-pip, I kind of want to be giving out a few more orders, especially with Rebels where you're very character heavy and dependent on bag draws, or clones where you want those orders, you want those surge tokens, you want that fire support opportunity. His 3-pip I could see Rebels using a little bit just because of the free moves, because it is troopers, so maybe like Tauntauns give it another move, another speed 1 move, but besides that, like, there's not really, the smoke token doesn't really do much in my opinion, because you have to be like fully within range 1 of it, and that's pretty hard to cover many units there. And again, it issues to 1 less unit than all the other 3-pips.
Keith's pointing out here that even generic 1 pips or 2 pips or 3 pips are going to potentially have value there. What do you feel about the potential of having a comms relay on R2, where you might take R2's cards, but situationally, if it's the play that you're pulling there, R2 becomes either that relay or that sort of feint in terms of like, oh, here's my 1 pip that I'm playing, but really secretly I'm gonna dish this over to my tank or something.
I can see that being good if you're taking his 1 pip, just because the text on R2's 1 card doesn't need him to have the face up to gain all the abilities.
Yep.
And he gains the suppression and the dodge like as soon as the card's played, right? So you don't have to wait for him to activate. So he's already unshootable. So there's no reason to not take a comms relay if you got the points and throw it onto a tank or throw it onto a more important piece like a Luke or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the neat things is potentially you throw and I think this combo works is you throw the order onto R2, you relay it back to Padme, you do quick thinking on Padme, you take a standby as her other action, then Padme's got, I think it's Exemplar that she can do the, is that Exemplar, is that her keyword? That's the share at range 1 to 2. Yeah. And now she's become, now you have a dodge suppressed R2 with disengage and jump, and then the ability to access multiple other tokens from Padme. That is such a nice synergistic combo. Not to mention you get 2 potential secret mission threats on the table with that. So fantastic. I think R2. I mean, we did a con section here, but let's just not kid ourselves. A lot of these cons that we have are, we almost have to sell ourselves on them. So, but nonetheless, we're going to press through and try to dissuade more potential R2 players. Auto include comes up here. Auto include question mark. Is R2 and I use this word again, not in the derogatory term, but is R2 a crutch unit? Does he become so much of an auto include whether he does anything or not in a game?
I definitely say with clones, he's an auto-include. For the same reasons we said before, you're trying to push your activation count, and there's not many other things that you can because clones are, as we know, the most expensive faction. Rebels, definitely less of an auto-include. Um, just because Rebels' offensive output is put up more so in their characters, in their commanders and operatives, right? Um, they generally have better, more tanky commanders and operatives than other factions. So I definitely see him being a lot more of an auto include in clone lists than rebel lists.
Right. I'm going to share a point on that, but I'm going to bring Robert's point up here. Thanks, Robert, by the way. Great interaction with us tonight here. I think R2 is fine without taking any cards. Don't disagree. Unless you happen to have a standard set of pips to switch out. Let me put that back up. There you go. While command cards don't cost us any points, they still add cost to the unit and they belong to, and that's something to consider. Absolutely. I actually make that
100%
point
agree.
all the time, that a 35-point unit that includes cards has significant value, whether you play them, whether you take them, or whether your opponent knows you have them or not. All that has intrinsic
Hmm.
value, I think. The threat of R2's Blast Off is still there whether you play Blast Off or whether you have Blast Off. As an opponent against an R2 unit, I need to be cognizant of the fact that you're doing that. You may feint me out. You may be 2 moves away. And I think, oh, well, obviously you're going to play this. I'm going to play around that. I need to position. And when you just don't play that because for whatever reason, you just didn't position R2 or didn't have the chance to get R2 to threat, I still have to react to that threat. And maybe potentially I've pulled something off. Maybe I didn't reinforce the center point significantly enough. Or maybe I dedicated a unit to killing your R2, which was never going to potentially present a secret mission threat to me at all. So I think there's lots of things. That goes back to that head game point made earlier. The auto include, the reason we include it under cons is I just want you to walk me through this here, Jace. I'm a new player to the game, and I am seeing R2 everywhere, or I'm seeing R2 cost 35 points. So now my list building starts and ends with R2. He becomes an auto include, so now my list is effectively 765. And if I'm a rebel, maybe potentially I'm going for a bid, so I have to leave a little bit more room for that. If I'm a clone, I've never even heard of a bid.
What's a bid?
So it doesn't really even matter. However, if I'm starting with that unit, am I, and maybe not so much for a clone, but as a rebel player, am I potentially weeding other units out for the purposes of taking R2? And that being said, am I potentially inadvertently knocking out command cards because I feel I need that 1 pip, or I feel I need to take multiple R2 cards because that secret mission is so important to me that I may get a little bit pigeonholed or narrow focused on making that happen.
Yeah, so I would definitely say I've been guilty of this before. I sometimes go and I build a list, and the first thing I'll click into the list if I'm building rebels or I'm building clones, especially clones, slide R2 over to the right side and put him in the list first thing. Um, yeah. Um, I think that's bad for the game. Just when you have a unit, that's the first thing you're always wanting to put over into your list. I just don't think that's fully healthy. Definitely for rebels. I think with rebels have a much easier time with not needing to take blast off because some of their 1 pip command cards are just so much better, right? Like R2 runs great with Luke. He's already got 2 1 pips. You usually want to take both. Cassian and Jin are lots of times what you see him with. Both have really good 1 pips. You want both those 1 pips. Clones, there's not much competing for it. You will take Rex, you'll take his 1 pip, you'll take R2. You've got a choice between Ambush and Blast Off. And whereas in my list, I took Blast Off because it's a roll for priority, same as Ambush if we both play 1 pip. But instead of, it gives R2 more survivability that turn, and I can still always just pull from my stack and pull anything useful because once R2 is out of my stack, all the other units in the clone army are usually, have a good offensive output.
Yep. point you made earlier in that statement was that when you're taking R2 as an auto include unit, right? You're setting up your list,
Yeah.
and you're sliding them over, and then you cautioned around if a unit becomes an auto include, that maybe potentially that's not good for the game. If we can think back to playing this game from day one, you and I, we can think about all the other units that potentially have fallen into the category of auto include. The very first one that comes to mind for me is triple snipers.
Yeah.
And we know what happened to triple snipers, right? They became an auto include, so much to the point I remember when people were saying, "I just won't play triple snipers. I just won't play against triple snipers." So they had almost a negative stigma attached to them. Now R2 is a lovable character, and so he's not going to necessarily carry that inherent hatred. However, I think that when a unit like an R2 becomes such an auto-include, and specifically maybe there's a little bit of an exaggeration of the auto-include because he's in two factions. So now
Yes.
the relative frequency of R2 is inherently increased because he's in two factions. Like, I'm going to tell you, if other armies could take units of 36-point B1s, they'd be taking them too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unfair to say that B1s are an auto-including in droids because they are a necessary include. Now 6 copies, maybe not, right? But R2 has that built in, that inherent a characteristic of he's 35 points, he's an activation, he does all these things. I would say that R2 with no command cards, never scores a secret mission, is still worth the 35 points. Matter of fact, if I can have my opponent dedicate 2 or 3 rounds of shooting to my 35-point unit that I took as basically a filler, and that's all he did, that's fantastic, because that left 3 shots that probably weren't coming at something that was much more significant in my list. I guess what I'm a little bit worried about is new players taking an auto-include unit like R2 and not necessarily playing R2 as effectively as they could, but disproportionately investing a lot of effort into their R2, either giving him an upgrade or taking all of his cards because you really want to preserve that, and by doing so potentially eliminating other better cards and better cards that like you could actually use to support R2. Like other cards, other characters actually help R2 along. I mentioned Padme being one example of that. But being able to escort R2 around with a very cheap rebel unit is another nice way of keeping him alive. You want to give R2 some shields? Okay, well, first off, let's start with 4 naked rebel troopers. Secondly, sorry, shiny metal guy, but you're a 2-point wound sink for my R2 unit. C-3PO, that's fantastic. You can translate. I'm just looking to win here, so you're dying. And so there's lots of ways that R2 can be buffed without his own cards, and that's another amazing feature of him, that he's got a built-in guardian, and I can make that guardian as powerful as I want. I can escort him with a full unit of ARC troopers if I want when they drop. And now I got red dice saves with a pile of surges, and potentially that becomes R2's escort. There's a ton there. I don't know. Maybe you escort him with a unit of Wookiees. That's a lot of wounds.
Yeah.
Right. So
or Chewbacca.
Fantastic. Absolutely. I mean, that's a straight up guardian right there. Yeah. I'll take.
You can't even take that first hit.
No, exactly. I'll take all of that. So there's all kinds of ways that R2 just becomes exceptionally nasty. You want to melee R2? Fine. Then you're running into Chewie. Kravak's coming in here. He is saying, I've used R2 to pick up cards from the supply deck with the new condition, but that is rough because of the restrictions. There are several cards he can't really take advantage of, which is funny. Well, you know what? We could have added that to the con. You know what? It's R2 can't take all the supply drop upgrades, so that makes him bad. And matter of fact, I'm not taking R2 anymore specifically for that reason. No, but in seriousness, It doesn't really matter. You can't fault R2 for not doing that. I would argue that's probably not the best use of him, but I think he's also saying the same point. So, all right, let's talk about this one, which was at actually the top of our con list, and then we'll transition a little bit over here, and then we'll wrap up in about 15 minutes or so. But deployment dependent. You know what? We've been on this screen for a while. Let's slide over here. Jace will get you and I back on stream. We'll talk a little bit about vital assets specifically. Darren's coming in here with a question. Do you think R2 will be such an auto-include when clones start to have more choices? You know what? That's a good question. I'll let Jace start with that question, and then I will chime in myself.
So I think the reason R2 is such a auto-include for clones is just because he's so cheap. Right? Clones, the nature of their faction is everything is expensive, right? So it's hard to hit high activation counts. Now with ARC Troopers coming out, being able to take strike teams, that helps a lot. But taking 3 of those plus R2 is still super cheap, and it allows you to take everything else really expensive and still hit that 10 to 11 activation mark. So unless there's more cheaper units for clones to take, or more expensive units that then you no longer just have the points for R2 because you need to invest in that 3 core or that commander that you need. I think I can personally see him staying as an auto-include for a little while longer.
Yeah. So, Darren, my response, yes, he remains as an auto-include. No, he doesn't get straight up replaced. However, going back to a previous point that I made, I think that's why I feel R2 needs to have that bump or 10 or 15 points, where he's then on par with one of those strike teams, which then maybe makes a choice whether am I taking 2 strike teams that are R2 or 3 strike teams, or am I bumping my elite cores or my special forces. And then I think when he falls in that realm of being slightly more expensive, and not a significant increase, although 15 points is proportionally quite an increase, we don't see many units jumping up that much. I think he was, and this is, I'm not saying there's a fault in here, but I think he's undercosted to start. And I think that if he came out and he was 50 points to start, there would still be an argument that he is a fantastic unit and still of value at 50.
Yeah.
He is the cheapest unit in the game and still one of the best for what he does. He's not an offensive juggernaut. He's not a defensive juggernaut, although he has some inherent benefits that make him nigh unkillable in games. He's a threat. He's a command card carrying, unit. I think all of those things make him by far worth more points than he is. Tim Krabbuck's coming in here, and we'll always get these things up on screen, so you guys feel free to keep popping the comments up here. Once we get more Jedi operatives, it may put pressure to pick and choose, I'm going to read from the side here, which operatives you select. For example, theoretically, if you want to run something like 3 or 4 Jedi someday, you may see that becoming a thing. You wouldn't have room for R2 when there's really great operatives or simply fun operatives. And so Krabbuck never missing an opportunity, of course, to theorize units that are coming down the pipe. I don't fault him at all. But he makes a good point that we're only ever framing these opinions in the moment that we are. I said before, I don't want to advocate for all the changes I wanted to make in the game. That's not my push. But there is certain things that I'm going to have a natural instinct towards suggesting, and one of them being that I think he needs a little bit of a buff. Maybe clones need to figure out how to not be so awesome. There's some things in there as well. So and so obviously as more competition comes out and the choices become tougher and tougher, I think that's also a good litmus test for how good a game is. If you and I sit down and we make a list in isolation and we come out and our lists are nearly identical, because we're picking a list with all the best synergies and all the best units, and we're not using it and we're not flavoring it in any way versus our personal style or via our personal style, I think that's a bad spot to be. I'm not saying that R2 is making both clones and rebels completely broken because you're picking him. Because I mean, find me a B1, find me a droid player who's saying that, you know what, I think that three B1s is all you ever need, and you're not taking any more. Nobody's saying that right now. That doesn't make B1s too strong. It's a little bit of an unfair advantage when I'm saying like it's Grievous versus Dooku. Well, those are your only two options. So really, that is a bit of a flavorful choice. But that being said, Grievous is not an auto include, nor is Dooku. They're very similar costed, but they're not. They have role differences. R2 right now has role differences. The problem is R2 has role differences all within the same unit. He actually he actually is versatile. Where a Dooku and a Grievous, you're making a conscious choice as to how you're going to play that unit before you play the game. R2 is very much in the game. I can choose what I want to do with him, which is both awesome and OP at the same time. So if I can use such words. No, that's just some opinions around there. But let's talk a little bit about vital assets as we wrap up the show here this evening. And again, these aren't flavored specifically in R2 context, but I did want to kind of talk a little bit about that. And maybe you can talk about this in terms of your clones and things like that. So let me ask you this. Let's go real simple. War Weary, taking it in your battle deck currently or not?
100%.
100% you're taking it.
100%. I have 5 units of phase 2s, which are the same courage as my commander with 3 strike team. I have 1 unit in my army that is not courage 2, which is the max courage of my commander.
Okay, wait a second here. So by your logic, I'm taking it in my army, and I have only 1 courage 2 unit in my whole list, but I take it. So let's talk about that, because that's a distinct difference right there. Let me talk about specifically why I take it. 1, my Courage 2 unit is Grievous. He is my leader, and I take Endurance on him. So my ability to shed shed suppression is a little bit better. My B1s don't care about Courage. My Grievous, if I'm playing him right, isn't taking a lot of suppression anyway. So for me, I don't care about the suppression shedding because I'm likely not taking a lot and I'm not really losing any efficiency for this. I also have 2 tanks on my list who don't care. So my reason is that I'm not affected by suppression, and I feel that my commander is able to keep me around as a stability factor. Now, I don't take it because I'm not afraid of it. I take it because I feel this is a scary card for a lot of players. Would you agree with that?
I agree, and that's exactly why I take it. I mean, same as you, for different reasons, my army does not care about this. With all the army being the same courage as the commander, the courage bubble doesn't really matter as much because they can just use their own courage. But for other armies, I think especially like rebels, I think this one is it's really scary for.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of rebel units too that also like to stack suppression. And if you start stacking it and you get too far away, it's really easy to run.
If we can frame this in the sense of R2, you and I were talking a little bit about this. One of the reasons that I think that this actually becomes quite nice in that list, or to play against it rather, is that buffer unit that often accompanies R2. I like making it run away so that I can shoot R2 easier. I also like potentially where I'm able to get some suppression on R2 in, like I said, scare a unit away, put some suppression on R2. Maybe R2's playing his blast off and he's going to give himself a suppression. Maybe I'm able to sneak one through. Is any time that you can make R2 go in the opposite direction, I think that's great. And so this is one of those ways where I kind of get around that buffer unit where I can't shoot R2, but I can shoot the buffer unit. And because I have to shoot that buffer unit, oftentimes I'm able to ensure that I really get that stacked up, whether I kill it or not. Because when you put that really strong buffer unit with R2, sometimes you just can't simply chip through those wounds. But if you can make those wounds run in the other direction, that's an okay play in my books. So this is one of the reasons I actually like War Weary. But I will say that in the games that I've been playing lately, and probably it's partially my opponents identifying that I don't care about this, But I would say this is one of those ones that I put out there that almost becomes a freebie cancellation that I know they're going to burn a cancel on this. So yeah. I like it for that reason. So Robert says in chat here, what if a unit came with a command card tax? Example, what if R2 has to come with a command card slot that would change him as a must take, having to reserve one command card slot for him? I mean, I think right now it wouldn't hurt and it wouldn't be a tax because most people are taking Blast Off. Yeah, I mean, clones certainly just are fine to take Blast Off. Maybe Rebels, it's a little bit of a tax, but at the same time, I think that it wouldn't hurt them too bad. Although I think for a R2 player, it might hurt you in the fact that you're basically telling your opponent that you took R2's 1 pip at this moment. If you had to take one R2 card and you're playing a clone unit, what are you taking? You're taking his 1 pip. If you're taking a rebel unit with a bunch of characters, potentially you took a 2 or 3 to not, weed out another 1 pip. But at the end of the day, you're probably taking his 1 pip again anyway. So I think the tax may become too heavy at the information that you give away with that. I'm not opposed to the idea, but I honestly think that the tax should just come in the points that R2 pays and not specifically tied to the card. That's just kind of my opinion around that. Do you think that's fair or?
Yep, I agree with that.
Yeah, I think tax needs to be paid in the cards that you take. Like the cards that you have potential access to, I should say. So,
yeah.
Okay, let's have a look at another vital asset card here. Let me just swap that over to be on top so we can read that. Bombing Run. By the way, love this mission. Been having a lot of fun with it. I did just lose in a game on this, a very, very close game. You know what I lost to? R2 secret mission. Of course I did. But no, Bombing Run here, if you're not familiar with it, it's after the deploy unit steps, starting with the blue player, each player places 3 unclaimed objective tokens in base contact with friendly unit leaders. Doesn't have to be troopers, by the way, and that are within the player's deployment zone. So just keep in mind, just a small caveat here, if you're using rollout and you have vehicles, you aren't able to deploy them on those units that have rolled out seemingly. Go ahead.
Or if you've done a scout move with any of your guys as well too.
Correct.
A lot of people miss that.
Here's a question: I guess it would be after deployment though, so you would have already scouted there. So I was gonna say, what if you had it and you decided to scout out, but that wouldn't happen. So I guess the only one that could, I guess Leia's. What is it? Leia's No Time for Sorrows that gives us the move. I guess you could still have done that and got a free move off that one. So yeah, because that's like on the issue order phase. So okay, back to the card. Each unit cannot have more than 1 claim objective token. So unfortunately, you can't have a triple bombed up R2 running for secret mission. Each trooper unit gains the claim, and then all units gain the free drop. So your tank can drop a bomb, it cannot pick one up. Likewise, your RT or something like that can have a bomb. Your Stap Riders, when they come out, are going to be fantastic for this. Tauntauns, however, do creature troopers have the claim action?
Yeah, because they're a trooper unit.
Mm-hmm. So, once again, not to say you know what? If there's one thing I hate more than R2, it's Tauntauns, but that's not true. I love Tauntauns. But I can see people having the very similar conversation and feeling about R2 and Tauntauns. So, and at the end of the activation, each player can detonate 1 unclaimed objective token and flip that to the claim side. By the way, this bomb is stupidly impressive. Suppressive Blast, 3 red dice surge crit. I love it. It's the best bomb in the game. And when it hits, multiple units, which it can, and just another aside, I'm not sure about you, but I've really taken to the liking of, I have 3 of these bombs. I am not opposed to just dropping one off in the mid range of where I need to be if it's going to be super impactful. I will give
Yep.
up the victory point to just make that early bomb go off that potentially makes another unit drop a bomb, or a little bit reluctant to make a run. So if I can get that suppressive attack off on them to hold them up for a turn, sometimes that's even better than scoring the victory point. Certainly you don't want to do it with all three, unless of course you have a secret mission, which you can go off and score and win anyway, which is also sad. But how do you feel about R2 in bombing run? I know you played LJ in bombing run, and you strapped the bomb
Yeah.
to your R2, so he was the double point threat, which he is in breakthrough as well. But how did that go for you? And do you see that as a standardized role for R2?
So R2 was able to make it and drop off the bomb. He was not able to get secret mission, but I was able to win on points. Um, the whole reason I gave R2 the bomb in that game was due to the deployment, because we had to play Long March, and that's such a long, hard way for R2 to go. I just couldn't afford to give one of my core units that I need. I need their firepower. So I just couldn't afford to give a third one of them a bomb to have to run to the end zone to take it. So now if we were playing a deployment that was much closer together, say major offensive, or like hemmed in or something, right, where I'm able to get my clone units within that, or even danger close. Yep, I'm able to start a lot closer. It's a lot easier to get a clone unit to range one of their deployment zone and still be impactful. I probably wouldn't put it on R2 just because it makes people want to shoot him that much more. You're able to put out a lot more threats if you give it to something else.
Yeah, that's the point that you and I were talking about before, that it's nice to put that double threat on an R2 if you really want to draw that fire. So here's a bomb on my R2, he's coming for secret mission, I'm going to drop the bomb off the way, score a point there, and then I'm going to continue into your end zone, score another point there. However, it's kind of like going to the well one too many times. I would much rather present multiple threats, meaning I have 3 bomb threats plus a secret mission threat, and so now you're dealing with all of those threats as opposed to kind of 2 and 1. For the purposes of that, it's very scary, and if you get it off, great. But if you're not looking to draw a ton of fire, then potentially you spread that out. So I put danger close up here as one of the vital assets missions, as being, in my opinion, potentially one of R2's best missions. And the reason I say that is because you have 2 very close edges, and the fact that they're so widespread to the close edge that if you're able to deploy R2 late, which you can in Rebels, and certainly you can do more so in clones now as well, you really can just go the opposite of where your opponent deployed in force. And if they were fortunate enough to deploy in force on both of the leading edges, there's going to be a natural gap in the middle, and potentially you just cut R2 on an angle from the top one here, and then he cuts down through the middle, and then you're forcing your opponent to close in. And so this is definitely one of the missions I think is good for him. What other ones come to mind when you think about great missions for R2 in terms of deployment? What do you like for R2 if you had to pick ideal runs?
Ideal runs, battle lines, because just such, so broad. Major offensive, because their deployment zone is so big.
Yes.
There's a huge area to get into. If I'm talking my deck, hemmed in, because there's 2 red player deployment zones, and if they want to stop the secret mission, they have to deploy in both.
What about disarray?
Disarray is also great. You normally don't want to put more than 1 unit in the other side if you're playing units that like to bunch up, like clones or droids. So that leaves a pretty open objective for R2 to run towards.
For all of the above reasons, I've chosen to include Long March. I've chosen to include major offensive because it's a corner deployment and my tanks can have a little bit more room to deploy. I've also chosen rollout. Currently, I do have battle lines, and I will say this: I've lost in those 4 games. Battle lines was 3 of them, for the exact reason that I need to bunch my army to make a push, and R2, as you said, can go so widespread that the potential for me to cover everywhere that he can threaten from is nearly impossible. So I'm actually going to be dropping battle lines out of my list at going in favor of advanced positions. Now, advanced positions is not necessarily most ideal for tanks because they get a little bit clustered in terms of where they can deploy along the edge. You don't really have that depth. But to be honest, this is one of those cases where that 35-point R2 unit is forcing me to make a change in a card that I take for the off chance that Battle Lines gets pushed into that third slot. And then my ability to either push for something else that, one of those first two is negated. If I choose to negate one, let's say I like deployment 2 better than I like deployment 1, now I'm actually doing my opponent a favor by canceling the first card to get to deployment 2. Yeah. So for all those reasons, I have to take battle lines out, and it's a feels bad because I do push a 16-point bid specifically to get my battle deck. But when my battle deck helps my opponent win more than it helps me win, that's a problem.
Yeah.
That's some would say that's a 35-point problem. I certainly would fall into that camp for sure. But no, this Danger Close is a fantastic mission for R2, and like I said, he doesn't have to. Yes, long march is a run for R2. It is. However, you can make it if you so choose. You can make it pretty much in anything. But certainly there's ways to kind of create a bit of a stopgap. That short front for R2 hurts a little bit. I also like Long March because I'm able to put my linebacker unit, if you will, in my Grievous that I don't need to shoot forward in my list. And he becomes a nice, okay, you're going to run your R2, I'm going to meet you, I'm quicker than you, I just need to go diagonally to cut you off on these short edges. I'm going to touch you because you're not going to get away from me. You may use Blast Off prematurely, which I'm still going to track you down the turn after. Yep. And so, again, that's not the ideal use of Grievous, but if I can ensure that point doesn't go off and I can push the other objectives, like say I play key positions and I can get my Grievous back to the middle because I can cut you off, all those become good missions for me and bad missions for R2. So, yeah. Keep in mind, again, that's a 35-point unit that I'm dedicating 200 points to take care of, so... But yeah. I digress about that. So, okay, well, I think we've clearly highlighted all the reasons to not take R2. I'm sure that we've significantly impacted FFG's sales of R2. People will no longer be purchasing R2. Actually, on that point, as we end off here, isn't it funny how a 35-point unit comes in a box that is far more expensive than a 200-point unit? And comes buried in that crash escape pod. Now, I am certainly an advocate for FFG in all things, and so I'm not going to waylay this with a negative message. But is that ever not fantastic marketing to make a unit so darn good and bury them in a box that's I'm not saying expensive, but certainly more expensive than the average commander or operative or things like that. So and it certainly didn't deter me from buying R2 either. But hopefully we can get a cut of those sales after this swinging and swimming endorsement of R2 for sure. So awesome. Well, I think we've covered that off well. We'll get back to bashing clones in a future episode. I mean, this is just a long segue into the fact that clones are super strong and have access to this amazing unit. So good luck in your game on Thursday. I should have no problem tuning in for that. I was going to say I think I have something Thursday, but I do not. It's Friday and Wednesday, so I should be able to tune in and watch that. And hopefully you guys are as well. What does the timeline look like for after that? Like when this round goes, this is a 32 round. How quickly is the turnaround for 16, 8, and 4 down to the eventual 2? What's the wrap up time?
So you get a week to play each game. Technically, this round of 32 is supposed to end tomorrow, but me and Luke were able to get a 1 day extension just because I was away this weekend, so we didn't have many times that worked for both of us. Um, Actually, I think top 16 games have already actually finished.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, they're able to play it earlier if they want. So a bunch of people have already been getting their games
Okay.
in.
So who do we
So
have? Who do we have? So that was top 16. So then we have two people
yep,
already through the round of 8.
yep, two people should already be through into their round of 8.
Do you know who those folks are, or is that something that can be revealed to the
Um,
masses?
I'm sure it can.
Okay, Al is asking. Sorry, Robert had a question here. Bombing run gives me a visual of the Ukrainian berserker running. Oh, Ukrainian. Sorry, misread that. The Urukai. Wow, where's my head at? Definitely watching way too much CNN. The Urukai berserker running with the torch to ignite the bomb in Helm's Deep. Absolutely. I can see that. I can see that imagery. And then Al's asking, is the game going to be streamed? Al, who tunes in and out and clearly doesn't listen to the information we provide. Yes, Kingsley, Al will be streaming that game. I think he's Tower number 9. Yeah, Tower number 9 on Twitch, so you guys can tune in for that. Robert says Long March is also good because it offers another choice for the opponents to fire at. If they fire at it, frees up firing on other units. If not, and then the victory score. And then Zach's coming in here. Are the TTS games recorded? I think a lot of the streamers have like a week-long, like a VOD available for about a week after, I think, or so. I'm not
Yeah.
sure how long they go for, but...
So if you stream on Twitch, most of us have our like recorded VODs turned on, and the VOD will stay on our Twitch channel for up to 2 weeks.
There you go.
So you got 2 weeks to go and review them, and then after that, Twitch takes them all down.
Yeah. So Tower number 9, and that's on Thursday. So did you get us the victors for the top 8s? Did you have those?
Yes. So the 2 in top 8 is Dashes. So
Okay.
he's in top 8.
Yep,
He
so
just finished his game tonight.
Notorious Scoundrels. Yep. Okay.
And then AJST from England is also in the top 8.
Okay. Not sure. I'm not sure who that is, but congratulations to those two making it to the top 8, pushing through. So still got a ways to go for everyone else to get that taken care of. I'm gonna be immediately pushing for the TTS judges to DQ both Luke and Jace for holding up the bracket. I was unaware that they had an extension, but now I'm gonna go make a stink about it just because. I mean, hopefully we can just eliminate 2 clone players immediately. That would be fantastic. So both R2 players, by the way. So, and you guys have identical list if that was not clear before.
Yep.
So. That'll be fantastic to watch a roll off every single turn for priority. We'll see a lot of standby sharing, and likely the person that rolls the most crits wins. And that'll be super fun. So let's do some foreshadowing just before we say goodbye. If you have ideal matchup, now considering that you probably have very similar battle decks as well, what I don't think it's going to be any surprise, but don't give me all of them because maybe it will be, but you are going to be able to pick one of the conditions, missions, or deployment. You have a magic ball. What one of those 3 things do you want the most to happen?
That's tough because I looked at our all of our mission, condition, and deployment cards because they're all up on the website.
Okay.
And honestly, after looking at both of mine and his, I don't think either of us really care.
So what it's going to be is battle lines, clear conditions, and intercept the transmissions. Those are those I feel are the most default of defaults. But yeah, truthfully, I'm hoping to see. I'm hoping that the game ends on a melee between R2s, and the winner of that is the eventual victor. So that means somebody's actually blind backing with their R2 and one of them's pushing for secret mission. But I'm just in my world that's going to happen. So maybe it's going to be hostage exchange, and you guys are both going to put put the same clone unit out, and the R2s will be the eventual heroes there. So Nonetheless, we only have to wait till Thursday to see it happen. So go check it out. Like I said, Kingsley Tower number 9. He'll be streaming it on Twitch. You guys can check that out. I'll be there checking it all out, and we'll check back in. Jace will probably be joining us for a few weeks here, so he'll come back and tell us if he's eating lunch or if he's buying lunch. All right, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you guys next week.